You are looking at a species that is quietly going extinct, not biologically, but psychologically. If you look around you right now, at the workplace, at the family dinner table, or in the line at the grocery store, you might notice a specific group of people who seem to vibrate at a different frequency. They are the people who grew up in the 1970s, but to label them merely by a decade is to insult the magnitude of what they carry. They are not just older. They are the last human beings on this planet to have their brains fully wired in a world of silence, only to be forced to operate that machinery in a world of infinite noise. You need to understand the gravity of this. This is not about nostalgia. This is about neurobiology. This is about a unique evolutionary event. They are the bridge generation. They are the only people who will ever exist who know, in their bones, not just in history books, what it feels like to be completely disconnected. And yet they are the ones currently running the infrastructure of our hyper-connected reality. That friction, the grinding of analog tectonic plates against digital continents, has created a psychological profile that is explosive, resilient, and utterly misunderstood. They possess a ghost in the machine mentality. They use the technology, but they do not trust it. They live in the modern world, but they are not of it. Today, we are going to tear apart the polite surface of Gen X resilience, or boomer work ethic, and look at the raw, bleeding, powerful psychology underneath. We are going to explore why their minds are the only antidote left for our fractured, anxious society. To understand the 1970s mind, you first have to understand the concept of the void. Imagine being 7 years old. It is a Tuesday in July. It is raining. There is no internet. There are no video games. There are 3 channels on the television, and 2 of them are showing soap operas you don't understand. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, for a modern child. This is a crisis for a child of the 70s. This was a Tuesday. This specific environment of profound, crushing boredom was not a defect. It was a factory. It was a crucible for the imagination. When you look at a person from this era, you are looking at a brain that learned how to hallucinate fun out of thin air. They learned that the world does not owe them entertainment. They learned that dopamine is not something you download, it is something you manufacture. This rewired their neural pathways in a way that is almost impossible to replicate today. It gave them the ability to sit with themselves. Watch them today. When the Wi-Fi goes down in an office, watch the panic ripple through the younger staff. Then, look at the person who grew up in the 70s. They do not flinch. They simply shift gears. Their brain remembers the void. They are comfortable in the silence. They possess a cognitive endurance that allows them to deep dive into complex problems without needing a notification to ping them every 30 seconds to remind them they are alive. They learn to stare at a ceiling crack for an hour and build an entire universe in their head. This mental wandering is the root of deep creativity, and it is a skill that is effectively dying out. They are not just patient, they are self-sustaining reactors of thought. But there is a scar on this psychology, a callus formed over a deep wound. We need to talk about the Latchkey phenomenon. We often romanticize the freedom of the 70s, the bikes, the streetlights, the roaming packs of kids. But psychologically, this was a high-stakes training ground for hyper-independence. Millions of these children walked home alone, unlocked empty houses, and managed their own survival from the age of 8. The key around their neck was a totem. It symbolized 2 things: you are trusted, and you are on your own. This created a generation that views asking for help as a moral failure. If you are in a relationship with someone from this era, or if you work with them, you have likely collided with this wall. They will burn themselves out. They will carry the weight of the entire world on their shoulders, and they will not say a word until their knees buckle. Why? Because their foundational programming says, if there is a noise downstairs, you check it. If you cut your finger, you bandage it. If you are hungry, you cook it. No one is coming. This makes them incredibly reliable leaders, the rocks of any organization or family. But internally, it creates a profound isolation. They are the ones who check on everyone else, but they are terrified to let anyone check on them. They were taught that vulnerability is a leak in the hull, and leaks sink ships. So, They walk through life with a survivalist armor that is invisible to the naked eye. They are prepared for disaster at all times. They have a backup plan for the backup plan. They are the ones who still carry cash, just in case the digital systems crash. They are the ones who memorize phone numbers, just in case the cloud evaporates. They are not pessimistic, they are prepared. They know that systems fail, because they grew up in a world where things broke, and you had to fix them yourself. This brings us to the texture of their reality. The 1970s was a tactile decade. Everything had weight. Everything had resistance. To change the channel, you had to stand up and turn a dial that clicked. To make a phone call, you had to spin a rotary wheel and wait for it to reset. To listen to music, you had to physically place a needle on a groove. This constant physical interaction with the world shaped a psychology that values effort as the currency of truth. To the 1970s mind, the modern digital world feels like a hallucination. It feels weightless. It feels unearned. This is why they are often suspicious of influencers or digital nomads or passive income. It's not that they don't understand the economics. It's that it violates their physics. In their world, if you didn't sweat, you didn't build it. If you can't touch it, it isn't real. This makes them the keepers of the craft. They are the ones who know how to bleed a radiator. They know how to jump, start a car. They know how to sew a button. These are not just chores. They are rituals of grounding. In a world that is becoming increasingly abstract, where we own nothing and rent everything, where our friends are pixels and our money is data, the 1970s person is the anchor to the physical realm. They find peace in the tangible. You will often find them gardening, woodworking, cooking, or restoring old cars. This is not just a hobby, it is therapy. It is their soul reminding them that they exist in a three-dimensional world, not a two-dimensional screen. Now, let's look at how they handle conflict, because this is where the generational gap becomes a canyon. The child of the 70s learned sociology in the Thunderdome of the neighborhood playground. There were no moderators. There were no report user buttons. There was no blocking. If you acted like a jerk, you got punched or you got ostracized, and you had to show up the next day and face the consequences. You could not curate your personality. You could not filter your face. You were exactly who you were, in high definition right in front of everyone. This forged a bullshit detector that is military grade. They can smell performative authenticity from a mile away. They can sense when a corporate email is lying. They can feel when a politician is acting. They value raw over polished. This is why they often struggle with modern communication dynamics. They find ghosting to be an act of cowardice so profound it confuses them. In their timeline, if you wanted to end something, you had the difficult conversation. You paid the emotional tax. They view the modern trend of cancelling or blocking as a form of social delusion. They know that erasing a person from your feed does not erase them from the world. They learned to coexist with people they didn't like. They learned to navigate friction without falling apart. This makes them incredibly durable in relationships. They don't bail when things get awkward. They don't quit the marriage because the vibe is off. They understand that friction is part of the machinery of love. They are willing to do the maintenance work because they know that nothing works perfectly forever without a little grease and a wrench. Here is the most explosive psychological divergence, the concept of privacy. To a person who grew up in the 1970s, privacy is not a luxury. It is a fundamental human right. They remember a world where you could be invisible, you could leave your house, and no one knew where you were. You could make a mistake at age 16, and it didn't follow you for the rest of your life. There was no permanent record in the cloud. They look at the modern world, a world of voluntary surveillance, with absolute horror. They watch younger generations upload their mental breakdowns, their breakfasts, and their bodies to the algorithm, and they feel a physical recoil. To the 1970s mind, being perceived is a cost, not a reward. They do not want to be a brand. They want to be a person. This creates a tension in their professional lives. You tell them to build a personal brand on LinkedIn, and they flinch. It feels narcissistic. It feels dangerous. They operate on the principle, work hard in silence and let the success make the noise. But in an economy that rewards noise over competence, They often feel invisible. They are doing the work, but they are not doing the dance. But here is the secret power of this privacy. It gives them a secret self. They have an inner life that is not for sale. They have memories that are not on Instagram. They have opinions that are not on Twitter. This reservoir of unshared life gives them a depth, a density of character that is becoming rare. They are not hollowed out by the need for external validation. They know who they are in the dark. We must acknowledge the burden they carry. Being the bridge generation is exhausting. They are suffering from a unique condition we can call translation fatigue. Every single day, they have to translate their native values, patience, depth, privacy, loyalty, into the language of the new world: speed, surface, exposure, transaction. They are the ones teaching their aging parents how to use a smartphone, while simultaneously trying to explain to their children why it's rude to text at the dinner table. They are the universal translators. They are constantly pivoting between the analog logic of the past and the digital logic of the future, and they are tired. They are tired of the updates. They are tired of the passwords. They are tired of the subscriptions. They are tired of the fact that everything they bought 20 years ago lasted 20 years, and everything they buy now breaks in two. They are grieving the loss of quality. They look at the world and see an enshittification of everything: music, clothes, furniture, conversation. They remember when things were built to last, and now they live in a world designed for the landfill. This creates a low-level hum of grief in their souls. A solastalgia, distress caused by environmental change. But for culture, they miss the weight of the world. There is a wall inside them, a vault. Men and women of the 1970s were raised in an era of contained emotion. You didn't spill your guts. You didn't trauma dump. You dealt with it. Walk it off. Big boys don't cry. Keep your chin up. We criticize this now as toxic, but we forget the utility it had. It was a form of armor. It allowed them to survive instability. However, the cost is that many of them are walking around with 50 years of unprocessed emotion, locked in a pressurized tank. They express love through action, not words. They won't write you a 3-page poetic text message about how much you mean to them, but they will change your oil in the freezing rain. They will pick you up from the airport at 3 a.m. They will pay your rent when you lose your job. You have to learn to read their love language of labor. If you wait for them to verbally validate you, you might wait forever. But if you look at their hands, if you look at what they do, you will see a love so fierce and loyal it puts the poets to shame. But this stoicism means they often suffer in silence. They are the strong ones, which means no one asks if they are okay. And because they don't ask for help, remember the latchkey. They can spiral into depression or anxiety without anyone noticing until it is too late. They need you to break into that vault. They need you to ask twice, "No, really, how are you?" So, why does this matter? Why is this explosive? Because the world is breaking. We are seeing a mental health crisis of epic proportions. We are seeing a fragmentation of focus. We are seeing a loss of meaning. And the people of the 1970s hold the cure. They are the guardians of the slow life. They know that life is not a hack. They know that you cannot speed, run relationships. They know that deep work requires deep silence. If you are a younger person listening to this, do not look at them as dinosaurs. Look at them as time travelers who brought the survival manual. Learn their patience. Learn their ability to fix things rather than replace them. Learn their ability to sit in a room without a phone and just be. And if you are a person of the 1970s, stop apologizing. Stop feeling like you are falling behind. You are not falling behind. You are standing your ground. The world is spinning off its axis, and you are the gravity holding it together. Your analog traits, your reliability, your thickness of skin, your preference for reality are not bugs. They are features. They are the most valuable assets in a world drowning in artificiality. You are the only ones who remember what it feels like to be human without an interface. You are the designated drivers in a world that is drunk on data. In the end, the most explosive thing about the 1970s mindset is its quiet refusal to be performed. It is the strength of the oak tree in a forest of bamboo. The bamboo grows fast, it sways, it bends, it looks good on camera, but the oak tree, It took decades to grow. Its roots go down into the dark, wet earth where no one can see. It has scars from the lightning. It has rough bark. But when the hurricane comes, and the hurricane is coming, the bamboo will flatten and the oak will stand. You are that oak. You carry the memory of a simpler world, not to mourn it, but to use it as a compass. You know that life is not about the number of followers you have. It is about the number of people you would bleed for, and the number of people who would bleed for you. So, embrace your inner 70s grit. Turn off the phone. Go outside. Fix something with your hands. Look someone in the eye. Tell the truth, even if it's ugly. And remember, you are the bridge. You are the proof that a human being can be forged in silence and still withstand the noise. You are the last of the analog titans. Stand tall. The world needs you now more than ever.